China's naval defense strategy is grounded on the combination of offshore waters defense with open seas protection concepts. The offshore waters defense consists of two missions. One is to protect China's eastern coastal area, which is the country's most economically vibrant region. The other is to ensure the safety of the expanding shipping lines that are vital to China's economic growth. Open seas protection concept also has two elements. One is to extend maritime protection to waters over 600 miles from the Chinese coast by building supply depots in the disputed South China Sea, trying to conduct submarine activities in the Indian Ocean, and acquiring bases beyond the region. The other is to develop capabilities to conduct non-conventional security operations outside the region, such as naval diplomacy, joint maritime law enforcement, and humanitarian assistance. Compared with the United States, the PLA Navy has sufficient self-defense capabilities, but deficiency in cross-region operations and force projection is evident, though Beijing is trying to change that. On the other side, China's unique geographical location allows it to establish control over its local seas, the Yellow Sea, the East China Sea, and the South China Sea. That is what the United States has accused China of doing in the last 5 to 10 years. The so-called anti-access area denial A2AD or the Fort Fleece strategy. This is the real reason for the boiling over for China's island work in the South China Sea. Washington is sufficiently alarmed by a perspective to lose the maritime control in the region and has started the naval force race under an umbrella term of all domain access. Despite this, Beijing is adamant. In June, China said it was shifting work on disputed South China Sea islands from the dredging of land to the construction of military and other facilities. The U.S. containment policy against China includes not only holding of old alliances, but a creating of new. In the recent strategy, Washington pledges to strengthen cooperation with 6 long-standing allies: Australia, Japan, New Zealand, the Philippines, the Republic of Korea, and Thailand, and also lists 8 new partners: Bangladesh, Brunei, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Micronesia, Pakistan, Singapore, Vietnam. With help of its Asian allies, the U.S. are going to seal off the PLA Navy in South China Sea and prevent its moving into operational space. Further, Washington's diplomatic rhetoric over the long-standing allies, shared strategic interests, and cooperation in Asia, in fact, is aimed at establishing a coalition against China. Despite the fact that the U.S. official strategy is ignoring the Taiwan issue, the island may easily become a flashpoint of ongoing confrontation, and the Western media machine has already set the ground for it. On July 22nd, U.S. magazine The Diplomat reported that the People's Liberation Army's soldiers were seen running towards a building that bears a striking resemblance to the Japanese-built presidential office in Taipei. During the Series C of this year's live-fire Stride 2015 Zurine military exercises, the magazine argues 2 things. First is that PLA is practicing the storming of the presidential office to bring pressure on Taiwan in the context of its presidential and legislative elections in January 16, 2016. Second is Chinese military has been preparing to invade the island, but the fact should be taken in its proper context. The military drills are a signal not for Taiwan, but for the US. China shows its capacity to solve a Taiwan problem by force, to predict an attempt to use the island for strengthening of the US military presence. Also, aggressive activity of US special services through Taiwan or an economic sabotage threatening it. In other cases, Beijing would much prefer to reintegrate Taiwan without having to resort to force, but by cultural, economic, and political tools. Moreover, it already has a successful experience of lost territories reintegration, Macau and Hong Kong. Another area of the US-China geopolitical confrontation is the Indian Ocean. US strategists, media outlets, and public experts argue India is a rival state for China. Monetary wealth and power growth of both states will result in inevitable clashes between them. According to them, the motive behind the string of pearls strategy isn't in solving the logistical problems of China's maritime Silk Route, but are in encircling India. If established commercial ports will be militarized with the PLA Navy, the concerns about China's influence in the Indian Ocean region empower the US to involve India in the American area of influence as part of a global anti-China strategy. The good news for Washington is India has been actively building a new powerful fleet, including an aircraft carrier group, so it could be a very useful tool. Directly, Chinese and Indian maritime interests face off in Sri Lanka, leaving the Indians' area of influence under the impact of China's economic projects. For Beijing, ports of Sri Lanka, founded by Chinese investments, are a cell in planned maritime infrastructure from South China to Pakistan, a natural opponent of India involved in China's maritime Silk Route. The US will likely use these features to set on fire China-India relations, to use Indian political, military, and economic power to discourage Beijing from adopting its maritime policy in the Indian Ocean. The US's strategic purpose is to seal off the PLA Navy in the South China Sea and prevent its moving in operational space and encircle China by land. In this order, the US holds old and new alliances with nations in the Indo-Asia-Pacific region. The US media machine has already started information aggression against China-Taiwan relations in order to support the rise of Washington's influence on the island. Meanwhile, American special services will try to fuel Pakistan and Sri Lanka in order to make a triangle where the US and India oppose China in the Indian Ocean region. With Washington's support, the tension will also raise in the South China Sea, where Malaysia, Taiwan, Vietnam, Brunei, and the Philippines claim maritime territory. The US naval services will constantly strengthen their presence there in the Indian Ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, while preparing to deal a crushing blow to Beijing. China will answer with its fortress fleet strategy in its local seas by building a powerful Pacific fleet and putting into practice the maritime Silk Route project infrastructure in the Indian Ocean, all the while developing the relations with the Russian Federation in Eurasia. Also, India and China can absorb a lot of profit from the mutually advantageous cooperation. The only thing that they need for it is a mediator to start a constructive dialogue. Russia, which has a good fellowship with both, may become that mediator. This will solve the tensions in the region and allow the nations to go on to further development.
After months of mounting rhetorical war, the United States has conducted a patrol through the South China Sea. On Tuesday, the guided missile destroyer USS Lassen transited the area, sailing within 12 nautical miles of at least 2 China-made islands. A Chinese guided missile destroyer and a naval patrol ship shadowed and gave warnings to the US warship. Then Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Yang Zhesu summoned US Ambassador Max Baucus, lodging serious representations and expressing strong discontent over a US warship patrol. Beijing's attitude was that the US threatened China's sovereignty and security interests. In turn, Washington has demonstrated with this action that it rejects China's claim that the built islands mark Chinese territorial waters. Indeed, it wasn't the first public confrontation of the US and China. Tuesday's US patrol parallels the response to China's 2013 assertion of its expanded air defense identification zone in the East China Sea. Washington responded by dispatching 2 B-52 bombers to fly through the newly claimed Chinese airspace, defying China's rights to assert sovereignty over what the United States classified as international airspace. The official US position is that its vessels would sail close to land masses occupied by Vietnam and the Philippines, as well as to demonstrate support for freedom of navigation rather than the specific targeting of China. Nonetheless, it's clear that these so-called freedom of navigation patrols will continue. The US regional allies also claiming the South China Sea waters will likely welcome the actions. Despite the rhetoric about a freedom of navigation, the US has pragmatic interests in this region. In the ongoing US-China standoff in the Indo-Asia-Pacific region, the East and South China Seas, the Strait of Malacca, the Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean, as well as countless peripheral lagoons and bays, a crucial point of the competition. Ownership of a particular island, reef or rock, and the right to name a body of water is more than a question of sentimentality. It is the foundation of many national policy strategies. Securing the right to patrol, build bases, and regulate trade through these waterways can mean access to the resources critical to sustain economic growth and political stability. The Obamas' pivot to Asia and the US newly released maritime strategy de facto means that Washington has taken a course on a long-standing countering of China's influence in the region. A core but often unstated component of the US national strategy is to maintain global superiority at sea. By controlling the seas, the United States is able to deploy military power and to control the movement of goods worldwide. China's maritime strategy aimed to defend its eastern coastal area and crucial maritime routes in the Indian Ocean challenges the American approach. China has already stated continued incursions will lead to more concrete responses. The question now is one of the next steps. It's likely that neither side with contrary maritime interests will find the answer to avoid a crisis, even if they did want to do this. Furthermore, they have domestic and international reasons not to step back from their contradictory positions. In the Indo-Asia-Pacific region, the US has been rapidly building political, economic and military alliances to balance the raise of China's economic and military power. Beijing can't ignore this fact. Thus, both sides systematically move to a situation making possible a confrontation. But firstly, the tensions should escalate into crisis in the South China Sea.